So renewable energy, this is something which is super exciting because it's only getting more and more prevalent around the world, especially as we face mounting pressure, um, mainly societal pressure, really, about being more sustainable in our choices. And I mean, our choices in a micro level and a macro level. So, us in terms of, choosing to use less energy or turn lights off, turn off the aircon, whatever, to then countries choosing to only use electricity that's generated from renewable sources or non-polluting sources. What's really cool is Iceland runs all of it. Sorry, all of Iceland's electricity is generated from geothermal energy, which is awesome. Um, I find that so cool. I mean, that's just luck for them because they are. I mean, the landmass is literally on a tectonic plate, so there's a huge amount of volcanic activity there. Um, but it's pretty awesome how, like, literally there's no other power stations there. It's just geothermal. So yeah, just hot water is generated from the ground, which is amazing. Now, this is pretty nuts. I mentioned this before. When you actually see it as an infographic like this, you realize just the enormous potential that solar has. It's crazy. Like, you can see this infographics divided into renewable and finite. And so you see, yeah, like in terms of the reserves available, like the reserves that we have that we can call upon, you can see obviously the fossil fuels. I mean, we've only got natural gas and petroleum here, but and uranium. There's a lot there, but when you compare it to the size of solar power, like in terms of the potential, that makes you realize, like, wow, there is a lot of energy to be harvested from the sun. Now, obviously, there's downsides to this, which we're going to talk about, but it's very interesting to look at that and to bear in mind these potentials that are available. Now, the wind power is the first one. Wind power is very straightforward. More important with these things is to think about the positives and negatives of them. The positives are that wind farms, they can be built out to sea. They can be built on bits of land where no one really wants to live because maybe it's a very barren or very arid stretch of land, like a desert or something, where there's no natural resources there, but maybe it's very windy, and so it's a very good place to build a wind farm. So you can build these massive wind farms. And yeah, and one on a good windy day, they're pretty efficient. Like, they can actually generate a lot of energy, and they're very simple. Like, they're literally just an electric motor, which is being with a fan. With a propeller that's being rotated by the power of the wind. So as the motor rotates, it generates electricity, and then that gets fed into a transformer, and then it gets fed out to the grid. So yeah, they're great for on days that are windy and in very windy locations. Now, the negative side is that sometimes some countries build these in areas where people will deem that they are an eyesore. They're not the most attractive looking things, and they really do kind of break up the skyline. If you've got a lovely natural mountainscape, for example, and maybe there's a valley which is like a wind tunnel, and it's always windy in this valley, and an energy company or a government says, right, we're going to build a massive wind farm all the way down this valley here. You might get a lot of people protesting and saying, like, no, that's a beautiful natural landscape. You can't damn it. You can't visually pollute it with putting in a wind farm. And that's the problem with most of the renewables, is what we call visual pollution that they cause. So yeah, that's really an issue with wind power. Now, solar power is very similar, actually. Like, we've seen already the potential that solar power has, but the problem is that to harvest that potential, we need to have massive solar farms. Like, yeah, like, to get that much energy from the sun, you need huge scale solar panels, like, everywhere. Now, some in the US, some companies are, I mean, Apple are now proudly saying that they're running their entire Apple campus on solar energy, I believe, because they've basically built a massive solar farm out in the Nevada desert or the Californian desert or something. And and again, that's a good example of they're building it somewhere where there isn't really anything there. Like, deserts are arid. There's not even much natural um, wildlife that live there, and there's only a few things that live there. So arguably it's a good use of a desert is to build a solar farm there. Feel free to disagree with me on that. Now, the downside of solar panels is they are not terribly efficient. And they need maintaining in the sense that they need cleaning. As soon as you get even a thin layer of dirt on top of them, they that quite dramatically reduces the efficiency of them. So you essentially need to have something there to clean them. And in a desert, it's obviously all you need is a dust storm or a sandstorm, and that will cover all the solar panels in dust and sand, and that will massively reduce the efficiency. Obviously, another problem, a bit like wind power, is these are only going to work when it's sunny. On cloudy days, they'll still generate a very small amount of energy, but barely anything, and they don't work at nighttime. Obviously, at least wind power can work at nighttime. The UK is famous for having awful weather. So in some ways, the UK is a terrible place to try and have solar farms, because the weather on the whole, it gets not very many days of sunshine every year, compared to if you go to, for example, Dubai or the United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia. Like they have mostly sunshine there throughout the whole year, so that's an excellent place to use solar panels. And solar technology is only becoming more and more prevalent. Like, I like talking about Tesla. They have a whole solar panel branch or division of the company. It used to be called Solar City, but Tesla have just sort of merged them into Tesla, and they are developing like amazing roof tiles for houses, which literally look like roof tiles. They don't look like solar panels. They look like regular roof tiles that go on a house, and they're photovoltaic, so they generate energy. So they've got this vision. Imagine if all houses were covered in solar roof tiles. Can you imagine how much energy could be harvested there potentially? And then you can have a sort of Tesla Powerwall on the side of your building, which will then store that charge that's built up, so that then during the day it's charging, and then at nighttime the whole house is just running off the Powerwall instead of using power from the grid. So yeah, I guess the dream home setup is you have complete solar roof on your house. You live in a sunny location, obviously. And then on your driveway, you have a lovely Tesla, and your Tesla is charged by the energy that's harvested from the sun, and then you're literally driving your car completely off the grid. That's the dream setup, for a Tesla. So yeah, that's solar. And sorry, I forgot to mention disadvantages of, obviously, as long with the efficiency, is the big visual pollution, and they need a huge amount of space because they need to lie basically flat so they can face the sky. So because of that, they take up a very, very large amount of space. So tidal is a weird one. Tidal power in fact, all these other energy systems, they've got varying degrees of efficiency. Tidal power, if we go back to the infographic here, you can see like tidal is a blip. It's like a full stop on the actual infographic there. And the way this works is you have what's called a tidal barrage, and in areas where there's a big difference in water height movement between high tide and low tide, as the tide turns, the movement of the water can be used to drive turbines, which will then just rotate turbines and create energy. Now, the problem with this is that there's not many places which have a significant flow of water when the tide turns. And number two, they are really ugly, these things. If you've got a really nice, say, estuary where a river meets the open ocean, it's pretty ugly if you have this whole massive tidal barrage going across the estuary. It looks ugly, and it's going to deter wildlife. And also these things here, they are a hazard for fish. Fish swim into them whilst they're spinning. That could kill them. So and they collect coral and stuff, or algae, and they're problematic because then they need to be cleaned, and all the algae needs to be pulled off them and stuff. So they're pretty inefficient, to be honest. Hydroelectric is a very interesting one because this has a massive amount of potential for enormous quantities of energy. Like, if I just get a picture on here, actually, of the Three Gorges Dam in China. Yeah, I'll just get a picture on here because it just gives you an idea of the scale of like potential energy that can be harvested from something that's this massive. Like, I mean, the Three Gorges Dam is, well, it's a bit of a contested, literally contested beast of energy generation, because you can see here the sheer volume of water that goes through the dam is vast, and that is driving turbines inside the dam. So when they open the floodgates, or open the sluice gates, as they call them in the dam, that will suddenly start driving the turbines. And you can tell just the sheer wattage generated from this will be vast. But the trouble is with these is that they can't be left open all the time. They have to be closed to let the water level build back up again. So these are great to be used as like water batteries, so that if you suddenly need a massive injection of energy into the power grid because there's been a dip or one of the power stations has gone down, you can open the sluice gates on one of these dams, and then that will very quickly generate an enormous amount of energy, which can then be fed into the grid very, very quickly. So there's a running joke in the UK that whenever there's popular TV shows on in the evening in the UK, and this is on terrestrial TV, and then you get a commercial break in the middle, if it's like around sort of 9 p.m. when kids are in bed and parents are watching TV, there's often a joke that like everyone will go and put the kettle on in the commercial break. And so if it's a really popular TV show that literally everyone is watching, or it's a big football match or something, and there's half time, like what the power grids in the UK have to do, often they have to actually preempt this, and just maybe an hour before the commercial break or half time, they'll open the sluice gates on one of the dams to just inject more energy into the grid, so that to anticipate all these high current devices, kettles turning on, so there's not a dip in the power grid. So it's quite interesting. But yeah, you can see here that they're very simple at how these things work. The difficulty with dams is, number one, building them, because obviously you're having to shore up an enormous body of water. Number two is they are a massive visual pollutant. Plus, they damage the local environment, because you're essentially you're messing with nature. You're messing with how water flows through an area. I mean, if we look at the Three Gorges Dam, my goodness me, it's a bit of a monolith in the middle of a river, in the middle of a very large river. Actually, you can see here it's pretty ugly, to be honest, and also which is kind of scary. This dam is actually bending. So over the 10 years or so it's been open, the satellite pictures have actually showed it's bent over time, which is a bit alarming because it implies that it might fail at some point. So yeah, it's something to think about. So, but this is basically a big water power station. And sorry, another downside as well. There's